Thank you, Jennifer, and good evening. Welcome to all of you here this evening, and for those of you watching remotely in the number of cities around North America, to the talk show at the 92nd Street Y. Our guest this evening is former Florida governor, 2 terms, Jeb Bush.
Okay, all right already.
The same guy, who is presently the chairman of the Foundation for Excellence in Education. And he's the author of this new book, The Immigration Wars, Forging an American Solution, co-written with Clint Bolick. As Jennifer said, this book, there's a number of copies that the governor has signed. They're available after tonight's discussion. And we welcome him here this evening. He's an incredibly intriguing public figure, and we're gonna hear from him tonight. So, Governor, just to begin, buenas tardes, mucho gusto.
Buenas noches, buenas noches.
I thought that it's important, in order to ease the governor into the conversation, that we begin speaking Yiddish. Just to make him a little more comfortable at the 92nd Street Y. You know, he is from Florida, after all, and Yiddish is his native language.
Can I make a special shout out to all of the
Yes.
people that are watching this? I have a special place in my heart for all those folks, because you have a disproportionate number of places that are watching this in Florida. Love Florida. Hope you enjoy this as much as our great host here in New York.
Well, thank you, Governor. He is actually famously bilingual, and it's not just Yiddish. Spanish as well. His all 3 children are fluent in Spanish. His wife is Hispanic. You spent some time at some point living in Caracas, Venezuela.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, is it easier to write this book, Immigration Wars, given the fact that you've had sharing a life in 2 different cultures?
It is. It is, in fact. I think, look, I'm bicultural, maybe is more important than bilingual. For those that have those kind of marriages, appreciating the culture of your spouse is the most powerful part of the relationship, and being able to share that culture and live in it has been one of the great joys of my life. So we chose Miami to live because it is a bicultural city. It's as American as any, but it's also really has a flair to it that is related to this bicultural feeling. And I wanted my children to grow up in a bicultural way. And so I think a lot of people are fearful of change, and immigration brings change, and the walls of resistance are probably too high right now because we're living in an anxious time, and if you can imagine a dynamic response to the challenges we face, part of that strategy has to be immigration, and people are fearful. So if you've lived a life where you aren't fearful, you've embraced it, it's quite easy to understand the power of it. So I'm sympathetic for people that are thinking that somehow our culture changes with immigration in a bad way.
Instead of enriching.
Yeah, because history would suggest that it's made our culture unique and special, and it's enriched us in ways that are immeasurable. But in a time when people are anxious about their future, anxious about their families, you could see why people would be quite resistant.
I don't know I think I've either read it in this book. This is a wonderful book, by the way. You learn a lot about immigration, and we'll talk about this more tonight, that I had not thought of before. But I think either here or read somewhere else that when you first met your wife's family, that was a very different experience from the experience that you had.
Yeah, it sure was. So my wife is from León, Guanajuato, Mexico, which is in the center part of the country, and I was an exchange student. I went to Andover, Phillips Academy, and for a trimester I went down there to help build a schoolhouse. And I met her at the very end of that experience, and it was one of these things that just knocked me out. I mean, I fell in love literally at first sight. People say they do this. I've met a few. I'm one of them. I literally fell in love when I met her at first sight. And people think, oh, yeah, sure. I promise you. And it just changed my life in every way. I became more serious. I got out of school. I graduated from high school, got out of college in 2 years. Knowing me, no one would have suggested that was possible. I organized my life around convincing her first, because it took a while, to marry me. and to start our family. So it was a life-changing event. And it was different for my wife, who thought, like, here's this tall guy. She's 5 feet. I'm 6'4". Her first reaction is, I can't marry you. You're too tall. And then once she got over that, there were other things. And then I finally said, well, you're also, my dad, is like CIA director. And there was some explaining to do. So on both sides, but love conquers all, I guess. I don't know.
It is interesting, though. I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking about, it's not just your father who was CIA director. Your grandfather was a United States senator from a blue state of Connecticut.
I didn't tell my wife about that.
Yeah. And your family's very much identified with Yale University, and then you wind up in Caracas, and in Mexico, and then Caracas, Texas, Caracas, then Miami. It's quite an immigration journey of your own, but in the end, you're still a WASP, right? I just think it's important to point this out. And
I've actually converted to Catholicism.
So that's over.
It's, so white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. I'm a WASC would be.
Right.
No, I'm a practicing Catholic and proud of it, and I'm a converted one, principally because of that this was the faith of my wife, and I wanted our children to grow up in a non-mixed marriage, I guess. And it's been a real source of strength for me, actually. So no longer a WASP.
I will tell you, I think you probably figured it out. There's a few Jews in this room.
That's what I hear.
And they always know when there's a Jew around. A WASP around. They always do that. They notice that. So
look, all I'll say is my dad was a WASP, still is, and he went to Yale, served in the military, youngest Navy pilot in World War II history, went back to Yale, and he could have stuck around here, one of the zip codes up in this part of the world, and he moved to Odessa, Texas. The only non-Texas born Bush is the one that's the most Texan of them all, which is George W. He was born in New Haven, Connecticut. But my dad, I think, wanted to leave his own mark, wanted to make his own way. And in some strange way, I've done the same.
Right.
Totally different kind of path, but it's nothing's wrong with that. I think life, sometimes we get too comfortable in the life we have, and we miss the opportunities to explore the unknown. I think young people, particularly these days, are incredibly. This should be a time of just enormous discovery and excitement, but people are fearful of change, fearful of not having it all well organized out. And I think you miss so many things just by doing stuff rather than having it all planned out.
Now, you've clearly convinced us in just 10 minutes that to be bicultural makes your mind much more open, enriches your experience. Does this mean that if the Tea Party could speak Spanish, we wouldn't be in this situation? Although I have to point out that Ted Cruz does speak Spanish.
Not much. His dad speaks fluent Spanish. I'm not sure Ted speaks much Spanish. His dad speaks fluent Spanish. He's a Cuban immigrant, has a wonderful story to tell and very powerful one. Look, we all get inside of our little shells politically these days. It's easy to do. The broader things are harder to build consensus around these days. And, you think about it, how do you get your news now? You don't get your news from a source that necessarily challenges your views. Most people normally get their news from places that validate their beliefs, and on the left and right. And so you can customize your gathering of news now to really feel comfortable, never be challenged, always never have a growing experience as you try to acquire knowledge. And whether it's your pursuits culturally or your pursuits economically or who you hang out with or how you gather news, the world has become less united. And we don't have common places where there's not a common square anymore for us to interact with one another. You have to actually force yourself to get outside your comfort zone and be challenged. And my life lesson is that the joys of life are really being vulnerable, being out there learning as you go along and not just being comfortable. And I think our politics right now needs a little bit of that. We need to be challenged more. We need to try to build creative consensus and coalitions around ideas. If you have someone who may not be in your party that actually agrees with you, it's okay. You can actually shake hands and find common ground. You may disagree on 90% of the rest of the stuff, but why not pause at least where we actually do have consensus and try to act on it? And that's what's missing, is this lack of sense of what our shared values are and what how do we start forging consensus around things? And I would argue that if you look at the polling, immigration is a good place to start.
Well, let's talk a little about immigration, because this is something that we're all going to learn about a lot from you tonight. Let's look at the book. One of the arguments you make in the book is that border security, terrorism completely misses the point. That's not really the big ticket item when it comes to immigration. There are more important issues that we should be thinking about than merely border security, but it's always framed in terms of border security.
Well, it's always security first, and then we'll work on the rest of the stuff. And I'd say 2 points to that is the system is broken, and protecting the status quo means you're protecting a broken system rather than fixing it. So doing nothing is actually endorsing a system that doesn't work. To me, that's just not acceptable. Secondly, if you believe in border security, it's based on the rule of law, and it should be based on the fact that coming here legally should be easier with less costs and less risk than coming illegally. And in fact, today in America, for most people that want to come to our country, coming here illegally is the only way. So if you want to have secured borders, you also have to have an open legal system where aspiring people can come in. And so security first misses that point. You could have greater border security if actually you had a guest worker program where people that want to come and work and provide for their families can come and go, work in our fields, work in our hotels, take the jobs that no one else wants. Or have higher end, the higher up the economic ladder type immigration where H-1B visas are allowed and expanded, or economically driven immigrants can come and go, and you would have less illegal immigration. One of the facts that I didn't realize until we wrote the book was that 40% of the 11 to 12 to 13 million people that are here illegally, and that number, by the way, has dropped. We've had net out-migration of illegal immigrants with the downturn in our economy. But the number of people that have come here illegally, 40% of them came legally with a legal visa, and they overstayed their legal visa. They had a tourist visa or some other visa, and they just stayed because we have no system to actually know where they are.
And they didn't just slip through a border.
No, they came legally. They got their passport stamped, and then we said, see you later. Or we assume you're going to leave in 6 months or a year or 2 years, and that clearly, you could see why people get angry with a broken system that says, well, why do, it's like going to a movie. And who likes being like it happened to me today, where there was a long line to get into something last night. We went to a Broadway show. And this guy cuts in on the bathroom line at the intermission. I mean, literally just walked, no big deal, just like it's a huge line, it was a guy's line too, so, it's not half the size of the women that cut in. And so he just cuts in, no problem. I mean, those kind of things really anger people like myself and many others. And so if you think that our system is so broken that happens and you can't understand why people are angry, you could see why people get angry. We have to enforce our laws for sure. I mean, we won't have the kind of system we need to grow our economy unless we begin to enforce the laws and do so, across the board.
Well, you also point out in the book that we have an aging population.
Yeah.
And we have slow growth.
Let me check. Okay. I got a question now that I can see everybody. 10 years from now, we hope that we're all going to be 10 years older, right? Who's with me? I vote for that. So 10 years from now, we are going to be 10 years older, and the demographic pyramid that sustains our entitlement system, our productivity, our ability to grow, is now starting to look like this. We have a fertility rate that's lower than break even in our country for the first time, the lowest in American recorded history. Our fertility rate is lower than France, for example. So if we don't have, you're for that, that's great. Well, if you're a young person, you got to be hating it, because a young person now is going to have to take care of a lot of old people. And it's not sustainable. So either we go back to the old way of doing things, which is not going to happen for all sorts of cultural and social reasons, or we create an economically driven immigration system where young, dynamic, aspirational people come and pursue their dreams in our country to help us sustain the contract for our elderly.
But one of the things you point out is that what we've had is we've developed legally a preference for family unification.
Yeah,
and
this is
we have completely ignored the idea that what we really want are highly skilled people, highly educated people to be here, and instead we favored family reunification, which is not only unsustainable, but only makes that pyramid worse.
So I wrote this book with Clint Bolick to create a conservative alternative, or a conservative comprehensive immigration reform strategy prior to the election, thinking that it might be useful, hoping that I was wrong, but thinking that it might be useful for the rebirth and renewal of our party to actually be embracing this concept of an economic strategy using immigration as a tool. And I didn't realize the degree to which we've crowded out legal immigration in all the other categories by the broadest definition of family unification, family petitioning in the world. We're the only country. Normally, family would be defined, every other country is defined by spouse, that makes sense, and minor children. That makes sense. You want to keep families intact. But in the United States, starting in the 60s, this was not forever, this started in the 1960s, we included adult siblings and adult parents. And what's happened is the chain migration effect, it's called, has basically turned what used to be maybe 15% of legal immigration 40 years ago to now 75 to 80% of all legal immigrants are petitioned by family. And it's not the optimum means by which we create an economic strategy that allows us to grow and prosper. So Canada has 1/10 of our population, and it has more economic immigrants because they've had a narrow definition of family, and they have a strategy to attract, as you said, to attract the aspiring folks, the people with skills that can immediately be brought to bear to grow the economy, the entrepreneurs.
We send away a lot of PhDs who come to our universities,
Yeah.
and then we send them back home because there's no place for them here.
So here's another fact. We have this H-1B visa program for highly skilled workers, and normally the visa is for 3 to 5 years. And there's a cap on the number of people that are allowed to get green cards out of this process. We have 1 million H-1B visa holders that are here, and only 300,000 to I think 250 to 300,000 a year, maybe even less actually. I think it's like 200,000 a year are allowed in. So the math suggests that a majority of these people that want to stay are having to leave, and they become our economic competitors. They go back to their host native country, they set up businesses, or they work for businesses that compete against the businesses that they were working for here in the United States. It's foolish. And this is not a zero-sum game. I think a lot of people view immigration as, well, by supporting immigrants, you're taking away from me. And I would argue the exact opposite is the case. If we have this narrow perspective of, well, we're not going to grow anymore, and the pie is set, and that's it, and so I'm going to fight for mine, we're doomed. Our country doesn't work well in a static kind of environment. Our country works well when it's dynamic and aspirational and grows at 4% or 3.5%, not at this anemic rate we're growing now. And immigrants aren't a drain on that. They're actually a catalytic converter for sustained economic growth. And everybody benefits when we grow. This is not divvying up the spoils. This is growing the pie and creating an opportunity society again. We don't have that right now. We have people that mope around thinking, my life is bad. My children will not have the same opportunities that I had. What a horrible notion in America, the most optimistic of places. And that's where we are today. And I think an economically driven immigration plan or passing a law to be more strategic about this would lift our spirits up dramatically.
One of the ideas
we're going to talk about civic education and shared values because
I was just going to ask you this question.
Good, thank God.
One of the things One of the intriguing things in the book also is that you were critical of how simplified it is that when one becomes a citizen, you learn English and you answer, 6 out of 10 questions. And you thought, and you said, no, there should be, in order to become a citizen, you should learn more about the civics of our society.
Yeah.
And you should really learn more about just not getting 6 out of 10 questions. In fact, there's a really great anecdote in here. This applies to Americans, so you know where I'm going with this.
It's horrible.
It's a really great anecdote. He said that the statistics show that more people in the United States can name the Three Stooges than one Supreme Court justice.
No, I mean, this issue of civic education is critical for rebuilding a sense of what our shared values are as a nation. I mean, immigrants, here's the difference between much of Europe and Asia and the United States. This is what we are truly exceptional about and extraordinary, is that our national identity was based historically on a set of shared values. So the unwritten contract was you embrace these values. The values, I think we used to be able to figure out what they were, and they were unifying. They would be tolerance. Individual achievement is to be rewarded, not scowled at. Compassion, a sense of, meaning about your life and about helping others. That there were a set of values that we would embrace. And as such, the contract's pretty simple. Embrace those values, learn English, pursue your dreams, with a vengeance, if you like, and be successful, because that creates more success for more people. That's the American experience. In Asia, race is, or some exclusionary practice, is the defining national identity. In Europe, it's being European in each unique way in the country, but those that come, and many immigrants do come to Europe, they're second-class citizens. They're not allowed to be fully European. America is the only place, and Canada, I'd say Australia, Canada, and the United States, England's starting to get this right. There are some places, but very few that have had our history in this. And so civics education is really important for native-born Americans, where the number of people that don't know that there are 3 branches of government, or, Three Stooges analogy, those actually are true stories. It's pretty depressing. And it's true for immigrants as well. During my brother's administration, the test was made harder. But the simple fact is, you have to get 6 out of 10 questions, and anybody that wants to be a citizen, I guarantee you, because my barber, I studied with her when she was cutting my hair. She memorized 100 questions, my yearly at the Biltmore. She's a Colombian. She wants a better life for her and her daughter. She memorized every answer. Now, she is going to be a great American because she understands the power, the purpose of what an American is. But many people, if they want to be an American, they can just memorize this stuff, and it's not that hard. It's basically, Americans have a hard time passing it, but native-born Americans. But immigrants really want to be in this country. They'll figure it out. But we got to go way beyond that. And we need to rebuild what it means to be an American and have some sense of shared values again. Because that is what separates us from the rest of the world. And I think that might lessen people's fears about a wave of immigration being somehow a threat to our culture. I would argue our culture has gotten pretty depreciated. And we better start refortifying it in some way, put aside immigration. But immigrants could be a positive role in that, play a positive role.
Let's talk about education. You are presently the chairman of this Foundation for Excellence in Education. As governor of Florida, you made vast improvements in the reform of Florida's education program for public school. We spend, you point this out in your book and other writings, we spend more money in the world on education than any other country, and we receive...
I found out I was wrong about that.
Oh, is that right? Who else spends more than us?
Luxembourg.
Oh. But they only have 5 people.
Have you ever, that's kind of my point. Have you ever followed this PolitiFact thing, where now the new thing in politics is to catch politicians saying something incorrect, and they have like 5-star hair on fire. There's a judge that's the arbiter of what's correct and not. So I said in a speech that in the book, we spend more per student than any country in the world. I forgot Luxembourg, for crying out loud, and it was like 4-star, hair on fire, lie, you lied. I mean, it's like a rounding error in the New York school system, the Luxembourg.
Right.
So I apologize for all Luxembourgers, you spend more per student.
Well, but what is the solution here? I mean, what worked in Florida? What kind of reforms would you suggest nationally to get us out of this mess?
I would say that there's no one thing. There's no silver bullet. So, committed family life where education is restored as a huge value, a huge responsibility for parents has got to be part of this. I would say robust accountability. So we were the first state to grade schools A through F. New York City did it, and it was helpful to focus attention on the underperforming schools. Apparently the mayor-elect looks like he's going to kill that. That's a dumb idea, to be honest with you. It's better to have accountability around schools so that everybody knows where. In the case of New York and Florida, New York City and Florida, it's based on student learning. In our case, it's half to learning gains, half to proficiency, how you do to the standards. So it's a simple thing, but grading schools A, B, C, D, and F is so powerful because everybody knows F is bad and A is good. It's that simple, and parents and everybody then says, why is my school a D? And how are you going to make it a B? And in Florida, the lowest performing students and the lowest performing schools saw the greatest gains. We ended social promotion in 3rd grade, which you'd think should be accepted policy, that a functionally illiterate kid in 3rd grade should not go to 4th grade until they can learn to read. But in fact, about a third of our kids are functionally illiterate going into 4th grade in America. That is shameful. That is so disgraceful, because there's nothing you can do once children are required to begin to acquire knowledge, if you will. Instead of learning how to read, they're reading to learn. The gaps will grow exponentially if you allow that to happen. And we're so politically correct, worry about the self-esteem of little Juanito, that little Juanito can't read and write and calculate math. Their self-esteem problem is going to be the least of their problems when they drop out of school in 9th grade. And so this political correctness of our society today that doesn't challenge this fact. I believe that every child can learn. And so and most people, I've not met someone who said, no, that's not true. Some kids can learn, some kids can't. I think a lot of people actually believe it, but they don't want to say it publicly because it sounds really horrible if you think about it. I mean, it sounds ugly to think that some kids can learn and some kids can't, so we can just cast them away. When in fact, if you believe like I do passionately that every child can learn, then there should be no tolerance for functional literacy in 4th grade. And so we eliminated that. We cut in half the functional illiteracy rate. The OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation, the big dog group that is for the developed world, does the PISA test for 15-year-olds, where we rank, if you see those, we're in math and reading and science, and we're always, teens or 20s out of 30 countries tested. So we're mediocre at best. Interesting, though, if you ask 15-year-olds where they think they rank in America, they always think they rank number 1, and they're ranked 15th, 23, 25. If you ask the Chinese, who are off the charts number 1, or the Koreans, they always think they're like 15, 21, 25, and they're always number 1. So self-esteem is not all it's made out to be. Feeling good about how you feel is not really a strategy for learning. And they have a 4th grade test for 10-year-olds, I guess, and Florida oversampled this last year for this 4th grade international test, and we were second in the world behind Hong Kong, because we eliminated social promotion. We put reading coaches in every elementary school to teach teachers how to teach reading. We had a voluntary pre-K program that was literacy-based. We had no tolerance for the kind of abject failure and mediocrity that persisted. We graded schools. We had school choice, public and private. We kind of turned, this was controversial and it wasn't always popular, but we've moved the needle dramatically because we had a comprehensive approach. And there's a lot more to be done in Florida and a lot more to be done in the country. And if I had to pick the 2 things that are critical for our long-term success that aren't really ideological, per se, it would be immigration reform, and even more important, a transformation of our education system so that the right to rise exists again. Today in America, if you're born poor, there's a higher probability you'll stay poor than any time since they've tracked this. And if you're born rich, there's a higher probability you'll stay rich. I know the experience of most of the people in this room is totally contrary to that. And I know that that is not anything that people accept as an American value, that we've stratified our society.
Sounds un-American.
It does to me. And the way you change that is we have to recommit to a different, to family structures that are loving and committed to their children, irrespective of how it's organized and structured. That needs to be the highest priority for every adult, for children. And secondly, we need to be much more impatient about an education system that is adult-centered.
So, I know that you're an eternal optimist, but the news is grim, right? Our immigration system is broken, our education system is broken, but it's also true that our government is broken. I mean, we just went through...
Just three things.
Yeah. We just went through the debt ceiling crisis and sequestration and the partisan gridlock and the dysfunction and the raucous debate and the lack of the incredible divisiveness. I mean, let's be honest in saying that not only can't the two parties work together, but I think it's not clear whether your father or Ronald Reagan could have been even elected president as Republicans nowadays.
So we have a different political culture today, for sure, and there's not as much reward for consensus and compromise. That somehow you're invalidating your core convictions if you actually try to find common ground. And that's got to change. But I would be optimistic in spite of a dysfunctional government, which is really the explanation. I mean, the frustration I have is we're still a very dynamic country. I mean, think about the things that go on that are coming to a theater near you. The ability to take your own DNA, we've mapped the DNA, to take your own DNA and customize drugs that have efficacy rates, today of could be 25% are considered viable, or 50% that could be 98% for you. Think of the discoveries yet to be made in the life science sector that are going to alter for our grandchildren, for most of us, the grandchildren, like my little Georgia, Helena Walker Bush, my little 2-year-old Munchkin, she'll live till she's 120 at least. And so will your grandkids. I mean, that's the world we're in. Or driverless cars that actually happen right now. I've driven in one. It's the wildest thing I've ever done. I mean, it's like, I can't believe this is happening. It's not a George Jetson thing. It's done. It's done. It's in the, it's not in a lab. You can drive it on I-5 in Northern California. And in 5 years, it'll be launched. Think of the things that are, the ability to manufacture things out of nothing, the whole 3D manufacturing. The world is just exploding with technology and innovation. And my personal belief is that will overwhelm the old order in a good way, in a positive way. The question for us as Americans is, are we going to allow for this stratification to be the norm? And that's the question. To me, everything else falls from that. Are we going to accept the notion that there no longer is the right to rise? That if you build capacity and you have the tools to be successful, that you're allowed to do so. If we get that right, all this stuff right now just is going to be a faint memory, I think. I really do. I think that there's so much potential in the American experience, even today, that'll blow away all this stuff. And yet, look, that would be a minority position right now. I mean, most people just mope around right now. Oh, yeah, just over and over again.
Doesn't your father have something, put away the harp?
Yeah. Yeah, when he was in the ICU unit, he told my mom, put the harps in the closet. I'm getting out of here. I think you have to have a more positive spirit about the potential. We got to get things right, for sure. But there's a lot of good that's going on, and we shouldn't discount that. These idea that we're, 80% of the American people think we're on the wrong track, that deeply disturbs me because it almost becomes self-fulfilling.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about this partisan divisiveness? I mean,
stinks. It's a contagion that hasn't spread across the land. This seems to be a more Washington-centric phenomena, but it's bad. It's not healthy. it wasn't that long ago where a conservative that found a liberal to forge consensus on a subject was rewarded for courage and for creativity. Now they're rewarded with a primary. Similarly, liberals are in the same boat. So I guess my argument for people that see this stuff and say, oh, this is horrible, is that politics is a mirror image of us. It's a mirror image of our culture. The coarseness of our political dialogue is a reflection of the coarseness of our culture. The inability to find common ground is common in many cases in our own lives. It's common in a lot of ways. We're now disaggregating into groups that think alike, and that validates our own beliefs, makes us less tolerant of other people's beliefs that we don't necessarily agree with, and makes us more righteous in our own beliefs and maybe more radicalized in our views. That's not healthy. But it's not, well, politics is separate, I don't want to have anything to do with that. That's us. We're the ones that accept it, and we're the ones that could change it.
So, Governor, have you gotten through on the Obamacare website? Are you signed up?
I'll tell you what I'm worried about. I'm worried about my little four employee business not being qualified for. We haven't gotten to the small business market yet. We've seen the individual markets. 10 million people got notices they're going to lose their insurance. No one knows if they're going to get a deal through the website, because strangely in the most innovative country in the world we can't operate a website. It's like can't make that up, man. It's like $300 million you can't operate a stinking website. Come on, the country's far better than that. So you have all of this uncertainty. My guess is that there are a lot of small business owners that are going to lose their insurance and lose the plan that they thought they could keep and lose the doctors they thought they had as well. So haven't gone on yet because I've kind of thought maybe my own insurance is okay, but I'm getting nervous. And when I get back I'm actually going to check this out on Wednesday. I'm going to call the agent that sold us this insurance to make sure that it's still viable, because I got about a 50-50 guess that it isn't. Then I'll have to go on. But isn't it promised by November 30th all is well? Okay, well, December 1st I'll try.
Well, we're wishing you good luck with that. By the way, you mentioned your father a moment ago. How is he feeling?
He can't walk. He's 89 though, okay, so he's lived a pretty full life. He's in great spirits, and he's in a good place. He's in a good place. He's not as mobile as he'd like to be. I was hoping that maybe on the 90th he would jump out of a plane one more time, but the over-run on that is it's a little unlikely.
Now,
you know where I see him mostly is as Houston's #1 sports fan. So if you're, the Houston Texans game, he's always there, or he's an Aggie. He's a Yalee that showed the good judgment to change his allegiances to Texas A&M University.
Let's talk about your brother, George W. I know that you've said before that you feel that he has been underappreciated, and that
I probably said misunderappreciated.
Right.
Oh, he said that.
that maybe he will be vindicated by history, but there is it's become fashionable to downgrade his presidency, and he should deserve.
Sure, that's the nature. I'm not saying there's a bias against my brother. That's the nature of history. So Truman now is regarded as a great president. He left with approval ratings that I think were lower than my brother's. Who knows how President Obama leaves the stage, and who knows how 20 years from now people will look, or 30 years, how they'll look at his tenure. My dad got 39% of the vote in his reelection, and had the kind of operated under the shadow of a president who history has been extraordinarily kind to, Ronald Reagan, for good reason, and now has emerged, kind of for different reasons than anybody expected. So history, I think, history's good about this. This is why historians play a useful role in life, is that they have the time to be dispassionate and look back. And I think history will be kind to my brother.
There's yet another George Bush, George P. Bush, your oldest son.
Yeah.
Who is slated to run for Texas Land Commissioner.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I mean, it must be hard to be a Bush.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's hard to be a dad of a candidate. It's hard to be a son of a candidate. It's hard to be a brother of a candidate. I think it may be the hardest thing is to be a dad of a candidate, though. Now I appreciate my poor dad's anxiety of having two sons run at the same time. In fact, I got to tell the story because it shows you the power of bad timing and also the angst of being a dad. So my dad, he served as president. He was vice president for 8 years. He took his hits as elected officials do. I'm sure he didn't like it, but it was no big deal really. After a while, you get used to it. But your sons are running for governor from 2 states at the same time. I called my dad to say, hey, it doesn't look like I'm going to win. I'm sorry. The night that George was winning in Texas, and they were going down the elevator to accept the victory. So my poor brother is going downstairs to have his victory speech. I called him. My dad happens to be in the elevator, my mom, dad, George, and Laura, and my dad starts crying. And like George is saying, well, what about me? It's like, poor guy totally deflated the whole, if I just waited another minute or two, or
let him get out of the elevator.
5 minutes, yeah, for crying out, that was the dumbest thing I ever did. So it's hard it's easier to be a candidate than someone you really love and care for, and I care for my son. He is a great now dad. He's got to show you our bicultural nature. His son's name is Prescott Walker Bush, and little Prescott. So George is George P, to separate from George W, right? So we call him P and call George WW. And so little P is the name for Prescott. Little P is this little ball of joy. He's like 3 months old. And in Mexico, in Spanish, little P means chicharito. And Chicharito happens to be, coincidentally, the nickname of the striker of the Mexican national football team, who's this good-looking Mexican young kid who plays in the Premier League in London. He plays for one of the English teams. So his real nickname is Chicharito, and he's a joy. And so George is, he's a dad. He's been successful in most of the things he's done, and he'll be a good public servant.
What advice have you given him about his election?
I give the same advice to people I really care for, and that is, in the world today, get outside your comfort zone. Campaign amongst people that don't always agree with you. Learn. Use the campaign as a great experience to learn. You're never going to, what I learned as a candidate was, you're never going to get this experience again in your life. If you do it full time and you're kind of all in, it is the greatest, most joyful experience if you do it right, which means you have a chance to be better, grow, listen, learn, validate your views, have them be challenged, but don't go around raising money and just hanging out with people that adore you and care for you and like you, and everybody's hugging each other. The world needs people that wander around a little bit and recognize they don't have it all figured out, and that's what's missing. So I didn't do that as well as I could have my first time, and I lost, so I got another chance. And the other lesson in politics, by the way, is to make sure you run against bad candidates. If you can find, it's really hard to beat a really good candidate. I ran against Lawton Childs. He'd never lost an election, and he went to his grave with that same fact. So it gave me a chance to do it differently, and I decided I was going to go. I had pretty radicalized views about schools. So I said, well, I'm going to go visit 100 schools to show people I don't have horns growing out of my head. And I loved it so much, I got through them so quick, I said, well, we better do 200. And by the end, I'd visited 250 schools as a candidate. And I actually think that of all the things, all the advertising, all the things that we did in a big state like Florida, the thing that mattered most was the ability to tell stories in a human context, because I actually learned far more than I taught, if you will, by going and doing that. And that's what's missing, I think, a lot of times when you have the chance in campaigns. So George is doing it. He's actually, he's down in the valley. He's going to places that Republicans don't go. And that's good for him, and it's good for the state that candidates, younger people, hopefully will start doing that more often.
So P, I'm going to speak of him as P.
Not little P, just P.
Little P, right, P. Has he given you any advice about the year 2016? Many people are here because you're not only an intriguing man, but they're interested. They're checking you out. And I think there are many people in this room rooting for you.
So
they want to know.
It's kind of interesting. I've not gotten advice from, I've not sought it yet. So I'm trying to avoid the family conversation, to be honest with you. I want to defer that to when it matters. I've learned, I'm 60, so I've made massive mistakes. I've been old enough now to make big mistakes and had some successes. And one of the things I've learned through mistakes mostly is there's a time to make a decision, and you shouldn't make it too early, and you shouldn't make it too late. There's a time, there's a window. And this is not the time for me. This is the time to show a little self-restraint. So he actually hasn't given me advice, and I'm not sure I'd take it quite yet anyway.
Can the Republican Party win back the White House in 2016?
Yeah, I think so. I think we'll see how this plays out. Look, we've got first of all, there's going to be a reaction to, just as there has been here in New York. I'm a friend of Michael Bloomberg's, and you could say by all accounts that Bloomberg served really well for 12 years, but I think he can honestly say that the city is better than when he assumed the position. Of course, in his case, it was right after 9/11. There's a lot of reasons why that's the case, but he built a better city. But you wear people out. It's just a fact of life, and 12 years is a long time, and there was a natural reaction to that. And so we'll have a similar kind of thing, just as we did. I have 8 years of my brother. There was a natural reaction to him. There's going to be a natural reaction to the president, particularly if this healthcare thing continues on its path. And my guess is that we're going to have some serious potential challenges globally that are playing out right now kind of below the radar. Iran and Syria being the one that gives me the greatest concern. But there are other places where the lack of a consistent policy creates instability. And so you have the counter action to whoever the person is in the current occupant. And then that's not enough. I mean, for Republicans to win, I think we need to focus on a message that is more hopeful and optimistic and more positive and less reactionary to what we have now. And it should be more inclusive, and it should be open for all. We shouldn't be saying, hey, our math shows us that we can just get older white guys and win the presidency, because the demographics of the country don't suggest that. And we need to have a conservative message that is more positive and goes to every American that wants to hear it. And if we do that, and I would argue that it ought to be about high sustained growth where everybody benefits, not just those that have already made it. And if we do that, I think we can win. But we got to start. We got to start doing it.
But you also say in this book that the Republican Party would not be able to win without luring in more Hispanics.
Or Asians.
Or Asians.
Sure. I mean, that's the point. The point is, let me put it in perspective. My dad, in 1988, got 60% of the white vote. In 1988, he won by 14, something like that. He won in what would be considered a landslide by American standards. He won going away. Fast forward to 2012, Mitt Romney got 60% of the white vote and lost by, 5? What's the difference? Well, the difference is obvious. The difference is that 88% of all voters in 1988 were white, and 72 or 73% of all voters in 2012 were white. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that demography matters in politics. And if you have a message that is not inclusive for all, that somehow people have turned off even listening to you, you're not going to get their votes. It's just that simple. And so immigrant groups, younger people, there are all sorts of parts of American life that have had now 6 years or 2 election cycles where we've not made an effective case, not felt that those, correctly or wrong, I mean, I don't suggest this is fair, but but a lot of voters have just turned off the Republican message thinking it's not relevant to them, when in fact they may share many of our values. So we have to change that, and we should start now. I mean, that should be something that should be just an accepted fact. You don't win unless you get 50%. In a two-person race, the only way to win is to get 50% of the vote, plus one. It's the only way to win that I'm aware of, and you don't do that by narrowing your party and by purifying your party or all this nonsense. You win by expanding your party. And you do that by creating a totally different tone to your message that draws people towards you.
Can moderate Republicans like a Jeb Bush, like a Chris Christie, coexist with the Tea Party?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a bunch of things that we agree on. First of all, why did you just, we've had such a nice conversation. You just attacked me by calling me a moderate.
That's why they're here, because you're a moderate.
Well, look, I am temperate in my tone, I hope. This is how I talk to every group I talk to. I don't change my message to any group. And I was brought up to be temperate. That may be that WASP thing again.
Yes, there we go.
There it goes.
You can't escape that. You could go to Caracas, but you're still going to be a WASP.
But it's okay to have a tone that is not nasty or mean-spirited. What good does that do? And so the harshness of our message is the bigger issue, I think, than the differences, the nuances of the different strains of conservative thought. Look, I'm a conservative, and I'm a practicing one. I'm not a talk about it one. I was governor of a purple state for 8 years, and we eliminated, just to put it in perspective, I don't want to offend people here, but we eliminated affirmative action by executive order and replaced it with a means by which we had more minorities attend our universities than the old system. We privatized our child welfare system. We created a community-based care model for dealing with the abandonment, neglect, and abuse of children rather than just saying it's the state's responsibility. And we improved dramatically the situation of kids that were just cast aside by society. As a conservative, I believe that you put the people most vulnerable in society first in line, and those that have already made it, they can wait. They can get in the back of the line. So we expanded dramatically the programs for the developmentally disabled. We radically went after, we changed, well, not radically, but we changed our education system. We cut taxes every year. I never raised taxes, I cut taxes. We shrunk the size of government by about 8%, I think, in terms of the state employees. Now, that's a conservative, best I can tell. But it's an action, it's not a talking conservatism, it's a practical one that got to do things. And those are the kinds of, I would put my record up against anybody that is in Congress right now. And the difference is that when you get a chance to do it, there's a story to be told around it. When you get to talk about it, it doesn't quite resonate as much.
But you say in the book, and I read elsewhere, that the Republican Party has become, and I suspect some of this is related to the Tea Party, the party of no. And you want the party to be a more optimistic party.
I want the party to be principled. I want our elected officials that share the conservative view to be principled, the principled loyal opposition in Washington. But I want the party, in the broader sense, to be four things. To be not just reacting to the overreach. Look, the overreach has created the greatest wave election since 1936. The 2010 election was exclusively driven by the anger and energy in opposition to the president's stimulus package and to this massive overreach in terms of the health care law. And it's likely that 14 will have a similar kind of, the similar kind of situation. But that doesn't necessarily persuade people that we're going to elect a conservative president. We have to be for things. We have to create an agenda that restores our confidence that we can be better than we are today. And you can't do that just in pure reaction to what the other guy's saying. That's the missing part of this, I think. And that's why, if you had to pick one issue where this would be a good one to embrace, it's think of who immigrants, the people that come from far-off lands, or our neighbors, are the ones that are the risk takers. They're the ones that don't come to get in line for government programs. Some people say that is just ludicrous. They're the ones that risk everything to come to be able to put food on the table, most of them, in many cases at least, put food on their table for their families. They have family values. They're coming to be able to make a better life for themselves. They're not necessarily going to become American citizens, by the way. Many of them want to go back and live the life that they left behind at great risk. But those that want to come and stay here, that embrace our values, are going to be conservative if we let them be. If we actually allow them to embrace our message and not be, sending this signal that we want everybody, of course we want your vote, but you can't be on our team. That message doesn't work. You have to be respectful of the immigrant experience and recognize its power. And it's no different today than it was when many other people came to our country a generation ago, 2 generations ago, 3 generations ago. It makes us aspirational. And the risk takers are what we need, and they're more Republican than Democrat in my mind. But you got to go make that case. And if you send a signal, no, DREAM Act kids are, a few of them are valedictorians. DREAM Act kids are the kids whose parents came, illegally, and so therefore they came illegally. Like they've done something wrong. And a few of them are valedictorians, but for every valedictorian, there's 50 that have watermelon-sized thighs bringing drugs across the border. That is so shameful and so insulting to the immigrant experience. And that's the message that is on the margins of conservatism, totally out of the mainstream of conservative thought, that gets the attention. And so I feel compelled to have a different view, to be able to explain, in fact, that there is a disproportionate number of DREAM Act kids that are valedictorians, that they want to stay here. Of course they want to stay here because many of them were close to being born here. And they want to make a contribution. They want to join the military. They want to go to college. They are American. And we should be more respectful of that. And we should fix these laws to allow their full potential as Americans to be fulfilled.
Let's take a few questions from our audiences, both here and remotely. This is from inside our house. Governor, your mother said, we've had enough Bushes in the White House. And this person says, do you agree? And then she says, we don't agree.
So, does everybody have a mother in the crowd? I mean, it's like, I love my mom, and I listen to my mom. But I don't always agree with her. I mean, even when I was a teenager, I would listen respectfully and never always follow what she'd said, even though she was probably right. And now at the age of 60, I really feel I don't have to, listen to every word she says and take it. At some point, you got to, make these decisions kind of like a grown-up, And so I love my mama. She's spectacular. I was really blessed to be, when I came into the world, to wake up, my little eyes open up and say, I'm right next to Barbara Bush. This is I've just won the lottery. But that doesn't mean I necessarily agree with everything she says.
This comes to us from...
And that's vice versa, by the way. She doesn't agree with everything I say either.
This comes to us from Durham, North Carolina. This is an anecdotal one. We know Jeb stands for John Ellis Bush. Not everyone knows that, but this person did. When did people start calling you Jeb? And does anyone still call you John or Jack? Do you like being called Jeb?
I do. And I like the fact that it's a pretty unique name. I know of 3 dogs named Jeb, and a few humans, including my son, Jeb Jr. Well, actually, he's no longer Junior. What happens when you get the aging process is really kind of scary. You go from being Jeb, and your son is Junior, Jebby Jr., then he becomes Jeb Jr., then he becomes Jeb, and you become Jeb Sr., and then you just become Senior. So I like the name. It's a great name. And it was my Uncle John is in the audience somewhere. I was named after him, and Ellis was my aunt's married name. And my dad and mom actually stole it from Aunt Nancy, who I think confided in my dad that she was going to name her son John Bush Ellis, named after John. And in fact, he came in the world 2 weeks after I did, so they stole the name John Ellis Bush. And it was from the get-go, it was Jeb. I'm not quite sure why they came up with it, but I like it. Durham is the place, by the way, the home of Duke University, that now is a football team. Who would have thunk it? They whooped the University of Miami.
Painful.
just killed us, and who would have thought that Durham would be the place where a football powerhouse, Duke University. Kudos, Duke.
All right. I don't know if you've got kudos for Sands Point, New York, but here it comes. Why did John Boehner table the immigration reform bill? And then this, I guess, relates to some things that you've already said. Did the Republicans want to write off the Hispanic vote?
No, I don't think they do, that they want to get a bill passed, and I don't think they have. There's a lot of disarray right now inside the House caucus. So the Speaker has to be careful that when he takes bills to the floor that he has a majority of House members, because I don't know if you've noticed, there's not a lot of trust between Madam Pelosi and the Speaker. It doesn't work out that well when they have to work together. So, you know, I think this is likely to, I think there will be bills passed. It won't be one comprehensive bill. And I think it'll probably be in late spring, where there's a little bit of a window before the election starts in earnest. I hope so. I hope that's the case. I've talked to Speaker Boehner, and he's totally committed to this, but he needs to find a way to get enough of the support. So my guess is that a stripped-down version of what the Senate bill looks like, which wouldn't be a bad thing, that focuses on these DREAM Act kids I mentioned, that focus on more enhanced border security, including the expired visa problem that we face, expansion of the guest worker program, expansion of H-1B visa, dealing with the chain migration effect. Those things, if those elements are done separately and passed, you could go to conference and deal with the one pressing issue where there isn't consensus, which we have to find some solution to, which is, what about the 11 million people already here? That's the question that there's big pushback in the House. It's the degree to which people have to pay a price for their legalized status, whether it's a path to citizenship or a path to legalized status, is secondary to the degree, how long will it take? What are the burdens that have to be borne? And there's real disagreement on that. And that's the hardest part, and that's the part that has to get settled for the rest of it to happen, I think. I don't think the Democrats, which play a role in this as well because they control the Senate, will allow for a bill that doesn't have, and I think we should find a solution to this. And the Senate's version, just for everybody, to remind everybody, was 15 years, a path to citizenship that said for 15 years you pay 3 fines, I think, over the period of this time. You learn English, you can't accept any federal welfare payments, no Medicaid, no, I don't think even student loan assistance or anything like that, and you can't violate the laws of the country. That's a pretty big price to pay for coming into the country illegally. Reminding everybody that in 1986, when the Simpson-Mazzoli, the Reagan immigration bill passed, there was like a 2-year waiting period, and that was it. No penalties, no fines, no nothing. So I'm comfortable with that, and I hope the House gets comfortable with it as well, but that's the one drawback for sure.
But you ended up being surprised yourself that some Republicans actually supported a path to citizenship and not just for legal status residency.
Not many, but enough to create a consensus in the Senate for sure. Marco Rubio, I think, gets a lot of credit for kind of leading the parts of the party towards that for sure. A lot of that, it was a surprise when we wrote the book. We wrote the book prior to the election. And immediately after the election, there was a lot of therapy given, self-therapy. Oh yes, we must change. We must embrace diversity. We must do all this. That's kind of gone away now. But at the beginning, it was there was kind of a higher awareness than what we anticipated that we're on the wrong path. It was quite rewarding, actually. I mean, I think that's the first step towards change is when you recognize you got a problem.
Governor, I know that in this room and in the cities watching remotely, you've earned a lot of votes here tonight, and I hope...
Votes for what?
I don't know. I hope that you will put it to good use. Thank you, Governor Bush.
Thank you. Thank you.